Hey fam, welcome or welcome back. Tisha here, hoping that you can hear me. I'm recording this a little bit differently than I normally do because I have absolutely no space on my camera and I got a lot of deleting to do. So hopefully this works. We are back for The Witness Wore Red, the 19th Wife Who Brought Polygamous Cult Leaders to Justice by Rebecca Musser. I've been saying her last name wrong. With with Bridget Cook. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the like button as we jump into chapter 4, Armageddon. During the next few years, my only refuge was my music. I was allowed to go to Suzuki Camp again and continue my lessons. Although I had been classically trained in violin, I began to adore the energy and adventure of fiddling, as well as the unique sense of belonging when a group of us fiddled anything from Irish reels to The Devil Went Down to Georgia, a song that would have been strictly forbidden at church or school. At home, everything except the monotony of homework seemed to change rapidly. In 1991, Savannah graduated from Alta Academy, followed the next year by Brittany. It seemed impossible to me that my babies, Joshua and Jordan, had now begun second grade. Zach was already in first, and Alyssa, who was no longer toddling around. Sometimes I cried quietly at how quickly my siblings were growing. However, my mom had had another sweet baby girl, Sherry, who had come on the heels of Levi, so there wasn't much time to miss the diapers and the bottles. I cannot begin to imagine how hard that must have been constantly having children back to back like that for her body. But it just seems like something that, they consider to be a good thing because the more children you have, the bigger your kingdom is. I just wonder at what point she's going to get a rest. We know, like in other books, like I believe it was Irene Spencer, who had so many children that it damaged her body, and it got to the point where she was told not to have any more. And I think about, that when I hear about how her mom just keeps having these babies back to back. As we adjusted to an ever changing household, it became apparent that something was dreadfully wrong with Christine. No one was able to pinpoint the cause of her mysterious suffering, but she had difficulty breathing, suffered from headaches and intense pain in her chest, and couldn't seem to rest. We didn't dare ask, we didn't dare take her to a doctor, so she became the subject of many experimental treatments. Our mother, aunts, and concerned friends tried multiple homegrown and home tested remedies, everything from fasting to colon cleanses to ice baths. They did all of this experimentation on what sounds to be like a little girl. Breaks my heart. She chopped raw onions and pressed them into a paper towel, which she laid upon her chest and abdomen every night for a year. Sometimes when I went to visit her room to brush her hair back from her dark and sunken eyes, I listened to the sounds of the house and wondered if she was suffering a physical manifestation of the hopelessness of her eventual fate. Wow. She was now 20, hardly a spring chicken in the eyes of the FLDS. Okay, I didn't realize that she was older. I thought that this was a baby, but the point is she had been suffering all this time. When Rulon Jest had become our new prophet, he had halted the practice of quickly marrying off women as soon as they turned 18, desiring to get to know his people first. Only recently had the aging prophet began performing marriages again, so there was hope of marriage and family for Christine soon. But daily my sister saw the ugly reminders that while marriage could be a way out, it could also give entry into a graver situation than ours. Certainly, there were healthier families, but we knew some who were very much worse off. What would it mean to be shackled here and in the eternities to an undeserving priesthood holder or a sister wife who beat our children? Whatever the case at school, when the girls separated from the boys in home economics, we received constant training from Mr. Jeffs about exactly what kind of obedient wife we should turn out to be. Isn't it crazy how this man is telling women about how they should perform as wives? I don't know. And I'm not saying that as a woman you can't get counsel from a man. It's just he inserts himself over and over and over again in every aspect of their lives, including this. Spouting the words of the prophets, he said, we must keep sweet, never complain, and always defer to our husbands in every important decision. I want us to remember this because a lot of times I myself am guilty of this too. When we hear about some of these stories and when we think about people like the Browns and the stuff that they went through, and even Christine's most recent book, I think that we forget that from the very beginning, there's indoctrination that's happening to them. And these are the things that they're told. So when we're like, well, why would you stay when all you were doing was suffering? It's because they're taught that that's a part of their life, like they're meant to suffer. Women were not to try to lead their husbands. Boys, on the other hand, were taught never to let a woman get the best of them or be seen by the Lord as weak and undeserving of his heavenly kingdom. Let me be clear. I'm not saying all polygamous families do this because we have seen instances, example, like, I can't think of Barry in My Five Wives, where he did allow the wives to have opinions and things of that nature. So I don't feel like all polygamous culture is doing this, but I do feel like there is a great deal that does operate this way. You guys tell me your opinion. Having to be manly in the world and deed, they especially studied building and craftsmanship. Cole used those skills and went to work for Warren's brother Lau, who owned a construction company. Occasionally, I would go to visit him or bring him lunch on Lau's construction site. When lookouts warned of oncoming ocean inspectors, boys as young as 8 would hide out, lying on the floors trucks or pickup trucks with tinted windows until the inspector, excuse me, let me reread that. When lookouts warned of oncoming OSHA inspectors, boys as young as 8 would hide out, lying on the floors of pickup trucks with tinted windows until the inspectors drove away. Then they went back to work in pits, up on scaffolding, framing, and rooftops. So the boys are not supposed to be out there, which is probably why they're hiding, because they're underage and they have them working, doing things that they should not be doing. There's reasons why there's things such as work permits and things of that nature when you're dealing with younger kids. This is not something they should be doing at this young age, especially not to the degree. I'm not saying don't have them work, but not like this, not like that's their main thing to do. Lau took advantage of his young labor crew, often refusing to pay by saying proceeds were going to support the prophet and the church. Cole finally quit, but Lau didn't care. He had an endless supply of young labor. By 1992, my sophomore year at Alta Academy, doing my best at school kept me out of much trouble for a 16-year-old. Not all of my classmates were of the same mindset. Some were secretly cutting a class or two or even hitting the slopes with members of the opposite sex, an unpardonable sin in our society, especially among the illustrious elite at Alta Academy. Mr. Jess began catching wind of some of these clandestine meetings. If you know this is happening, you are as guilty as they are, he would say sternly. Those who were trying to toe the line were getting the short end of the salvation stick, none of the fun and all of the damnation. My half brother, Timothy, often cut class, then came home to brag to me and Cole about his snowboarding adventures. One day in spring, when the weather was exceptionally pleasant, several students were missing from geometry, a class taught by Mr. Jeffs. It was painfully obvious they weren't all sick or at work, as the alibis usually went. When Mr. Jeffs couldn't get answers from anyone else, he turned to me. Rebecca Wall, Mr. Jeffs said sternly. Is Timothy homesick today? I'm sure I looked like a deer in the headlights. I had never ratted anyone out, but I had warned Timothy that I would not lie for him. No, I answered, feeling equally relieved and terrified at the same time. Within a few minutes, several students were in serious trouble. By the following day, the fallout was unbearable for me. Most of my classmates were cold, and the ones who had gotten caught were mean and bitter. They began making snide comments whenever a teacher left the room. While I had been somewhat popular in my circle of friends, I now felt like a total outcast. It's kind of hard because what do you expect for her to do in that situation? I Timothy should have been in class. If he knew that his sister was going to say something, then so be it. But those kids were going to get in trouble whether she said something or not, because if he already had an idea that they were doing it, yeah. But of course, he didn't handle that the right way either, because now you got to know that all those kids are going to act out against her. Only my best friend, Sandra, and a handful of others remained kind. But even then, they were somewhat withdrawn, given the way I was being treated. Toward the end of the school year, I waited in Big Blue one afternoon for my older sisters. I expected Irene to be cranky because they were late, but she seemed to be in an exceptionally good mood. Are you going to the baseball game tonight? She asked. Among the Northern Utah FLDS, ball games were the only times we met for recreation. I don't think so, I said glumly. No, gloomily. Even though it's Friday, I have a lot of homework. I'm going to need the whole weekend to get it done. Oh, but it's such a beautiful day. We'll find a way to get you there if you want to go. I stared at her a bit dumbfounded. The games were held far south of town in Riverton, and she was never that generous to me. Irene then suggested I run in and grab the girls, which I did. We all jumped back into Big Blue and were making our way home when Timothy asked me to help him with some silvers in his hand he had gotten from woodworking. I rummaged through my large home ec sewing kit and found him a needle, but also discovered something else in the box. It was a note, a typed note signed by Carl Keat, Keate, asking me to meet him during the ball game. Carl was Sandra's brother. He was quiet, shy, good, priesthood boy. I had never known him to break the rules, but there it was in black and white. What on earth was so important that he would dare to write a note? This could get us both in huge trouble. They can get in trouble being teenagers writing notes to each other. Let's keep that in our minds here. They're teenagers and they can get in trouble for writing notes. No boy had tried to talk to me alone before, and certainly not Carl. A terrible knot rose in the pit of my stomach. Nervously, I arrived at the ball field that evening. I looked for Carl and saw him pacing the pavilion in the distance. Quietly, I made my way through the crowd toward him. He turned and looked at me. What the hell is this? I asked, pulling his note from my pocket. I didn't normally speak this way, but I was furious. Carl's own face, which had been masked in anger, changed to a look of surprise. What do you mean? I got one just like that, except it's signed from you. Oh no, they're getting set up. We looked at each other, realizing we had been set up. But by whom? We looked over at the crowd, but didn't see anyone watching us. Together, we agreed we wouldn't fall for any more notes. I'm sorry for the trouble, we both murmured, and quickly went in separate directions. That night, I confided in Christine, who suggested I tell Dad. My adrenaline still pumping, I decided she was right. Fortunately, Dad believed me. He said not to worry about it. Still shaking, I went to bed, only to toss and turn. Who would do this when our reputation was all we had? The following Monday, after school, I was in the computer room with several other students working on our papers. Carl Keat was in there, but to my relief, he didn't acknowledge me. Several minutes later, Mr. Jeffs poked his head in the door. Don't tell me that he did it. Mm. Carl Keat, go home right now. We all looked at Carl in surprise. For the first time, he had glanced in my direction, grabbed his stuff, and headed out the door. Our principal went back to his office, and the moment he left, I ran and called my mother. Mom, what's going on? I asked breathlessly. Sis, Mr. Jeffs called us. Someone took a video of you and Carl Keat together. Suddenly, the principal's voice boomed over the intercom, calling me to 310, the dreaded office. I want you to see something, he said when I entered and handed me the video. Put this in. Even though my mother had warned me, I still trembled as the screen clearly showed me walking out to meet Carl Keat at the pavilion at the ball field. Who has that much time? Who has that much time where they put these notes in this thing, and who has access to their stuff to do that? This is sounding like something an adult did, but y'all tell me what you think. I wonder if she's going to let us know. Mm. Oh, goodness. Why don't you tell me what's going on here? Exactly what you see, I blurted. I found a note in my sewing box. I was so upset at him, thinking he was getting us into trouble. We found out we each had a typewritten note and someone else signed our names. Warren asked me several more questions regarding the video. I was grateful that we hadn't touched, not even elbows or fingertips. The video showed no signs of anything improper. Do you know who took the video? I shook my head. Well, let me tell you how I came to find out. Someone set this against the door to my office. He showed me a manila envelope and a note in block writing, to whom it may concern. Rebecca Wall has been sneaking around, engaging in multiple encounters with Carl Keat. They're always making eyes at each other. We just happen to have a video camera handy to prove it because no one would believe it. Signed, a concerned individual. People need to grow up. It just, yeah. Do you recognize the handwriting? Yes, sir. It looks like Devin Johnson's. Most of us knew each other's writing, as we had been in small classes together since grade school. Don't tell me that somebody did this because she said her brother wasn't homesick. I was ready to expel you. Your saving grace was that you already talked to your father. I trembled, knowing what the outcome would have been if Warren Jeffs had thought I had been lying. He pressed further anyway. Did he say or do anything inappropriate to you? Did he touch you? Are you having any boy problems with him? No, I'm too busy to have boy problems. I have too much homework. Good, he said. We'll get to the bottom of this. The one who points the finger is the one who is guilty of this themselves. Don't speak of this to anyone. I took a small measure of comfort in his words, but my mind was spinning. The very next morning, Mr. Jeffs had all the high school stay for a morning class test. Now, I want to talk to each and every one of you. The words of the wicked lie in wait for blood, but the speech of the upright rescues them. Last week, there was an attack on two of our student body. We have a good idea who was involved. If you do not come forth and confess and apologize, you will be expelled for the rest of your years in school. The classes held their breath, but no one spoke. A few days later, Nancy Jeffs and Stephanie Fisher apologized to me. Nancy was the one who signed my name. She said the boys had come to them, and because of Devin's handwriting, I had sort of figured it had to be them. I realized my half brother Timothy must have been involved, but what she said next was shocking. Mrs. Wall helped them to write the note. What in the world? A grown woman? This is too much. Becky, it was her idea. Irene, that had hit hard at the pit of my stomach. Her other mother, the first wife, is that what she's saying? The first wife did this? That night, I told my father. He became very upset and stayed away from his first wife for 2 or 3 nights, but she never apologized. Why does he keep letting this lady get away with madness? This is ridiculous. Like, I don't understand. I don't. While her plan had fortunately backfired, the dagger remained in my heart, made worse by the fact that Carl was sent to Canada for the summer by his strict and angry father, and Sandra was told to never speak to me again. She was pulled out of Alta to care for her grandmothers, and although she had never taken her education for granted, she was not allowed to return to graduate. So the kids who did nothing in this got punished, while the grown behind woman and her son and the others who didn't. From that point on, I lost my heart for school, a place where I had no friends and many tormentors. Devin Johnson and Gregory Jeffs were very cruel. Every time I walked into a room, they gagged and dry heaved. When Devin corrected my paper, he scratched out my name and wrote rectal wall. I didn't even know what that meant. With only 20 students in our class, I had to see them every day, and they made it a living hell. My one reprieve was when the girls had home economics and the boys had woodworking. Mr. Jeffs forced me to be in math, where both Gregory and Daniel were my classmates. So I started staying home. Oh boy. So her education is suffering as well because of what they done. I got all my classwork done, but I didn't have to put up with their hurtful behavior. I felt like Christine with no hope for the future. I would not have returned to school had Mr. Jeffs not called my home and ordered me back. That year, our principal turned up the heat on our priesthood lessons. He seemed obsessed with Armageddon, and he quoted the prophet as saying it would happen at any moment. We had to be prepared. Our thoughts and actions had to be of the utmost purity so that we could inherit the earth. We did not know our priesthood history was vastly different from the world's history and American history taught in other schools. Ours was dictated by lessons from the Bible, the Book of Mormon, and our modern day prophets, beginning with Adam and Eve, then Aaron and Melchizedek. As they were both instrumental in the spirit special priesthoods of the church, we then skip to the Romans and the Jews in Christ's time. Touching somewhat on Christian ministry, his crucifixion, and his resurrection, we study the principle of plural marriage. This is what's dangerous, right? A lot of the Bible, and this is for those of you who believe in it, a lot of the Bible is taken out of context. There are words in the Bible that have been created that did not exist in biblical days. So sometimes I get really irritated when people pick and choose what aspects they're going to read, because a simple scripture, if you don't take into context what's said before and after it, can be altered. And I feel like a lot of people weaponize it. And I'm sure that's what they did when it came to Jeffs and what he allowed them to read. Even Jesus Christ engaged in plurality, at least as far as the history taught by Mr. Jeffs. My goodness. Not only had Jesus been married, but he first appeared to his wives when he rose from the dead, as explained in the Bible, even before his beloved disciples. Following Christ's resurrection, the great apostasy covered the earth in ignorance and blackness, including the ensuing dark ages. Mr. Jeff's lessons included many terrible details of the Spanish Inquisition and the methods of torture contrived, as well as the total corruption of churches and governments. Skipping several centuries deemed unimportant, we studied Columbus coming to America for the purpose of a new world where the gospel of Jesus Christ would finally be brought back in its fullness. We were taught that the United States was the promised land as foretold in the Book of Mormon, and that in 1820, God in Christ visited 14-year-old Joseph Smith in a sacred grove of trees with a message of the truthfulness of the gospel. This visitation would begin the restoration of the gospel on earth. Later, Joseph received a visitation from John the Baptist, who conferred upon him the authority to baptize, and one from Peter, James, and John, who conferred upon him the authority to organize the church in 1830. In the early 1830s, Joseph quietly instituted the principle of polygamy, although it would not be publicly discussed and upheld until 1852. After Joseph and his brother were martyred in Carthage jail in Carthage, Illinois, all authorities and keys were granted to Brigham Young, who was succeeded by John Taylor. In 1890, the document that denounced plural marriage precipitated our falling out with the mainstream Mormon church. Mr. Jeffs reiterated the words of our prophets that the Mormons had sold out to the federal government by not adhering to God's commandment of plurality. That was when our people followed the true order of God and obeyed our own prophets. After John Taylor, there were John W. Woolley, Lauren C. Woolley, John Y. Barlow, Leroy S. Johnson, and finally, Rulon T. Jeffs. In fact, said Mr. Jeffs, the entire history of the world had led to this one point, to Rulon T. Jeffs becoming the prophet of the church. This was why, Mr. Jeffs explained, it was so vital to listen to the prophet. Fathers and husbands must choose to obey him and no one else. Wives must obey their husbands, who were faithful to the prophet and none else. This was the correct order of the family. In this way, we could not go wrong. You only get to heaven through the living prophet in your time. Because of this great power our living prophet holds, he is everything to us. I've said this before. I don't believe in any of that, but this is what he's saying. While teaching this period of priesthood history in the Americas, Mr. Jeffs focused primarily on the corruption of government. For example, during the United States Civil War, Mr. Jeffs emphasized how it not only had been improper, but immoral for Lincoln to have fought for the rights of slaves. Mr. Jeffs had a particular dislike for blacks and considered them lower than whites. Understand, because I don't talk about it often, because I'm not ever going to make this a thing where this is a political thing, because I feel like it's unnecessary. It's too heavy. I am very aware that, unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there who feel this way. And I'm going to leave it at that. In his view, the result of the Civil War was a major loss for mankind. Just as I observed in my classmates, there was some haughty, arrogant part of me that wanted to believe that we retained some kind of mental and spiritual superiority over others. But a deeper part of me cringed every time my principal ridiculed others. Yeah, because he's one to talk. I couldn't help but think of the hiding place and how the Nazis referred to the Jews as disposable. That book was at the front of my mind as our class began to focus on the world wars and the atrocities one people could commit upon another, even within their own ranks. As we reached World War II, Mr. Jeffs made us pay particular attention to Hitler and the Holocaust. With great fervor, he spoke in detail of the events surrounding this colossal period in history, and forced us to watch films portraying the thousands who died of malnutrition, starvation, and exhaustion. It's all a thing to kind of like have you thinking a certain way. That's what all this is. That's what he was doing. It served as a warning to us that the government regularly lied, terrorized, and exterminate people like us. Although I had always been fascinated by history and geography, priesthood history quickly became my least favorite class. It was about to become much worse. On the 28th of February, 1993, the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms raged a siege on the branch Davidian Ranch near Waco, Texas. Officials had attempted to serve a search warrant, but a ferocious gun battle erupted, resulting in the deaths of four ATF agents and six branch Davidians. The people barricaded themselves inside the ranch, and a standoff between authorities and the Davidians began. Am I saying that right? Davidians? Rarely had I seen our principal as animated as he was by this siege. Mr. Jeffs brought a big screen television into our 11th grade classroom, and every day we would watch news coverage of the 51-day siege, because this further shows his narrative that the government is corrupt. And I'm not saying that there isn't corruption in the government, but we're not going to sit here and act like there's not corruption in the church as well. Yeah, I said it. Pacing back and forth in front of the television, pointing out teams of ATF agents in intimidating SWAT gear with long range rifles, Mr. Jeffs made sure we understood the gravity of what was taking place. He said that this was surely the sign of Armageddon that our prophets had been warning us of. Every morning, when we gathered for morning class during the siege, Mr. Jeffs waved the headlines in front of the whole student body, describing what was happening blow by blow. One morning, I remember him being particularly theatrical. See how the government seeks to destroy these people because of their beliefs, he ranted, still pacing. Then he stopped and, with great dramatic flair, looked slowly over the students, holding up the paper. Beware! Because we are next. I saw the frightened looks upon the faces of the tiniest children and knew they were reflected in my own. Everyone looked afraid, even the teachers. Principal Jeffs made us stand repeatedly and pledged to stand by Christ, the work, and the prophet, even if our hearts are to be ripped from our bodies. What a way to intimidate these people and further have them blindly following you. Because wasn't it convenient that he decided to take out this TV and allow them to watch television for this program, but they're not allowed to watch anything else? You got people around there sneaking to let their kids watch little cartoons and stuff like that, but you could pull out this big TV and watch the coverage of this for over 50 days because it helps with the narrative that you're trying to create. It was my heart that felt so sick for those people. For nearly 2 months, we watched in trepidation and fear, praying for a peaceful ending and deliverance. Mostly, we prayed for ourselves while we listened for the sounds of helicopters overhead and men with assault rifles climbing the fence onto Uncle Rulon's estate. The tension at the school kept us at a breaking point. After listening to so much news commentary and the taped sermons of their leader, David Koresh, Koresh. I know I'm saying that wrong. Koresh. Alexa, how do you pronounce Koresh?
I pronounced that correct.
Alexa, stop. David Koresh. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something eerily familiar about their leader, whom I found creepy and terrifying. He's a lot like yours. That's what these men do. He's a lot like yours. 51 days after the standoff began, a second assault was finally launched, during which a disastrous fire broke out and destroyed the compound. 75 of the branch. Alexa, how do you pronounce Davidians?
I pronounced that Davidian.
Alexa, stop. I was pronouncing it right. Of the Branch Davidians died in the fire. Accompanying the announcement was footage of the charred and smoking bodies of 20 children and 2 pregnant women. I did not know that they showed those images. I didn't know that. And now knowing that not only did they show it, but Jeffs had that playing for these little kids to see, how terrifying all of that must have been for them. I couldn't help it. I ran out into the hall and retched. Though I tried to block it out, the voice of Warren Jeffs echoed in the room behind me. This is just a test case. what they will do to us will be much, much worse. And that's the end of chapter 4. This is crazy. Hopefully, you could hear me during this recording because I don't know. Um, just trying something different. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this chapter. Like the video as it helps. Until next time.